Back in my day, when I was 9 years old, I had to walk to school. All alone, more than 5 kilometers. That's how my Aunt Mary, the sister of my grandmother, started her story. She began with the famous phrase, "back in my day." By hearing those four simple words, I knew she was about to tell me something about her past life, about history, the one thing that fascinates me more than anything. As she went on, I listened very carefully. On the 5th of April, 1943, I left for school, and at the time we were living next to an old car factory. The factory was used by the German troops to repair their crashed airplanes, and therefore it was the main target for American airstrikes. I arrived at school, and the first lesson we had was religious education. I looked outside and saw one tiny, shining silver dot passing by in the blue sky. Just one moment later, I heard an enormous bang and felt the earth beneath my feet shaking. I started running outside with agony in my heart. Back home, I found my mother and my sisters all together, completely unharmed. The house was undamaged. I was very silent and felt impressed by such a vivid witness, and I kept my mouth shut as she went on. "Thomas," she said to me, "do you realize what this means? We have been incredibly, just awfully lucky. The American Air Force tried to bomb the factory next to my house, but by mistake, they threw their bombs on the center of Mortsel. Miraculously, we survived, and that's why I'm still here today." My aunt witnessed the biggest airstrike ever in Belgian history, the bombardment of Mortsel. It was incredibly fascinating to hear how she experienced real-time history. What she taught me is that history is not only about distant places and historical dates. No, it's about people's stories. And I will never be able to forget what happened to my aunt in April 1943, because I was confronted with it so directly. Listening to her story was a real eye-opener for me. She showed me the power of storytelling. By telling us those powerful stories, real witnesses can raise our awareness and make us less ignorant about the past, the present, and also about the future. Last week, I attended a presentation at my school about climate change. The speaker said to us that due to the rising of the sea level, there will be more floods in the future, especially here in Belgium and the Netherlands. He said that raising awareness is very important because climate change is real and will affect all of us. But do you really think a bunch of teenagers is going to change their entire lifestyle because of one guy who was talking to them with a monotone computer voice, using difficult language, telling them something they already know? No. I believe confronting people with the harsh reality is the only way we can make them realize how serious the situation is. And who better to do so than witnesses of natural disasters, or more specifically, survivors of floods. Since I'm the history freak here, the first thing that popped to my mind were the North Sea floods of 1953 in the Netherlands. More than ever, we need those people to step forward and tell us their stories. Only by doing that, we'll actually start making changes. And that's why I like the idea of real witnesses in history classes, or just any class. How much more would we remember and learn out of them? But what if every witness has passed away? Well, then there will always be silent witnesses, whose story can be even as powerful. So, there's no doubt that our world would be a better place if we learned more about the mistakes of the past. because people who don't know history are destined to repeat it. So who knows, in 50 years' time, what will you be telling to the future generation? What will your back in my day story be? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Thomas. In your introduction, you told us that you yourself like writing. So tell me, do you focus on teaching or entertaining in your writing, and why?
I would say I like to read first and then think about something, and then maybe write an opinion about that, and really express my own opinion, but first read some other people, and what can be even as interesting, yeah.
If we don't want to listen to people speaking in boring, monotonous voices, how can we help to preserve the stories of our ancestors?
We can look for very personal stories in our own families and talk to our grandparents, talk to our elders, and ask them, hey, what were you doing at that time? What did you do? And then you have a very personal story that you can take with you for the future and then pass on yourself. So if we start doing that, we'll make a difference.
When we hear a personal story, should the message we get from the story be the same as the message that the person telling the story be?
Not necessarily. I can give an example of this. I had a friend once, and he was quite racist. And I talked to him and I said, why are you so racist? And he started talking about why some people are different from other people. And it made me realize I don't think like that. I don't want to think like that. And the message I got from him is exactly the opposite I want to give myself. And by having this dialogue, I realized that, yeah, I don't want to be racist and I should be very careful.
The more stories are passed on, the more the teller of the story changes them a little bit. How important do you think biases are in stories?
Excuse me, bias?
A bias, that it's changed, so maybe that the story is told wrong than as opposed to how it really happened?
It can be very interesting too to see how stories evolve during time and how people want to change stories, for example, for their own advantage. For example, the story of Mortsel, the bombardment, was kept silent, and nobody talked about it because it was a friendly fire. People were actually quite ashamed that it happened because the liberators, the Americans, dropped the bombs on Mortsel, and people tend to see the other side of the war, the German side, and not the casualties on both sides. So, yeah.
How could or should we use books, museums, documentaries to tell these stories?
We can use them if, as I said, every witness has passed away, the silent witnesses. We can use documentaries to tell people about events that have happened long before us and take advantage of that.
Can they bring the same message?
They can, of course, yeah. I think it's always better or more powerful to have a face-to-face conversation with someone. But if that's not possible, you can always visit a place and it can have a heavy impact on you too. And, yeah.
Could you complete the sentence, when I grew up?
Excuse me?
When I grew up.
When I grew up, I started telling stories about my past and about the past of my aunt. And yeah.
I'm wondering, can all stories teach us something worthwhile?
Of course, yeah, I think so, because there are can be stories based on reality, but also fictional stories, and every story has its value. Even if there's a bad idea in some story, realizing that there is a bad idea is a valuable lesson too. Thank you.